Well, a couple years ago, everyone made fun of the Seattle Seahawks for trading away Russell Wilson. You don't trade away a top 5 quarterback. What are you doing? You guys are a bunch of idiots. A couple years later, it doesn't seem so stupid. So I figured let's make I did this for the Tyreek Hill trade. I think these things are always interesting. Let's just revisit how we felt at the time and where we're at now. Let's go back and look at the trade details itself and what it has meant for the Seattle Seahawks and the Denver Broncos. This was the trade itself. The Broncos received Russell Wilson, and they gave up a lot of assets. 3 players, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, and Drew Lock, along with a 2022 first, second, and fifth, and a 2023 first and second. So 2 firsts, 2 seconds, a fifth, and 3 players, Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, and Drew Lock. Lock is the backup quarterback for them. Noah Fant is, has been a contributor for them, and Shelby Harris is no longer on the team. So that's that. But okay, what about the draft picks itself? How have they worked out? Well, first, let's look at what they spent those draft picks on in 2022. These were the picks. They got Charles Cross, who's been an okay tackle for them. Been a bit underwhelming given what they drafted for him, but hasn't been a mess. Boye Mafe, who didn't do a lot year 1, but showed flashes year 2, and then a 2022 fifth that they traded away. This was that trade. It was actually, I talked about this in that Tyreek Hill video because it was brought up there. But Darian Kennard was selected by the Chiefs. The Seahawks got Tyreek Smith and Derek Young as their 2 players in that trade. So that's 2022. What about this most recent year? These were the 2 players they selected with their first and second round pick, and the obvious bright spot, the shining star, Devin Witherspoon, who was awesome last year. Did a lot of really good stuff. He is the clear kind of main piece in this entire trade. Derek Hall is also a player we will talk about because he's on the list. But as a whole, you could look at this in several different ways. This is the final chart again, and the Seahawks don't trade a lot of picks, so this is a lot easier than a Tyreek Hill trade recap where I had to go do a bunch of this trade for that trade. But what the Seahawks ended up giving up in this whole situation was Russell Wilson and Darian Kennard. So obviously the Broncos did not get Darian Kennard; they did get Russell Wilson. But that's all the Seahawks gave up. What they got was, look at this long list of players you get. Sometimes these trades are good just because you get a lot of players, and it's easier to get the value of one player when you have 10. Now, some of these players haven't done a lot. What you see next to each of the players is where they ranked according to PFF grades, and then if it's a dash, that either means they're no longer on the team or they did not get enough snaps to qualify. So Shelby Harris, as I mentioned, no longer on the team. Drew Lock is on the team but didn't get enough snaps to qualify right here. So that's why those are kind of not on the list, and you could argue not adding a ton of value. Drew Lock had that touchdown pass against Philadelphia to help Seattle, eventually win that game, and they were into playoff hunt because of it up until the final game of the season. So he did some stuff, but not a ton. But you're still getting 5 other players who are contributors, and I would say on this list, really, the way I view it, there's 3 solid contributors and then 1 star. Witherspoon, as I mentioned, he's a star. He's the main thing you look at for Seattle. And then Boye Mafe, Charles Cross, and Noah Fant all are valuable pieces. Kind of worth mentioning, it's not a landslide victory by Seattle, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, I like Charles Cross, but he's not typically what you expect with a top 10 pick, and I think that's part of why it doesn't. If he was a franchise left tackle, you'd be looking at this saying, what a devastating win for the Seahawks. I don't think you exactly look at it that way. I mean, the reason why we look at it as a devastating loss for the Broncos is because, if they gave up nobody, this was a worse situation. If they just signed Russell Wilson to his contract, if he was a free agent and they just signed him to that contract, it would have worked out terribly because Russell Wilson hasn't played very well. So, that alone, that's why this trade worked for Seattle. And that's why Seattle's been competing for the playoffs, whereas Denver, I guess, technically competed for the playoffs last year, but never really felt like a playoff team to me, at least. I think that at the end of the day, yes, if you trade away a quarterback who turns out is nowhere near as good as people think he is, that's going to typically help. And so when, Russell Wilson ended up being a negative asset, as it turns out, well then, yes, getting 2 first, 2 second, and a fifth, along with 3 players, that's usually going to be a benefit. And I would say, well, I don't know if Seattle's done like an amazing job. At the same time, they kind of have though. I mean, like Devin Witherspoon's been like a star player, right? So even if you didn't fully hit on Cross, like honestly, with 2 top 10 picks, getting like a solid tackle and like a star corner, that's pretty much what you almost hope to get in that scenario. So I don't sit here and necessarily say that it was like not great value. I think the Witherspoon pick was definitely kind of what I don't want to say saved it, but what kind of got it to be, oh yeah, they did a really good job. And again, Russell Wilson's been a net negative for them. So you have that aspect going as well. So, to make the comparison to like the RG3 trade, where if you remember when the Rams and at the time, the Redskins made that trade, the Redskins gave up a ton of draft picks to the Rams for the ability to trade up and get RG3. And so at the time, when RG3 didn't look good, everyone was saying, wow, the Rams, what a move, trading all these draft picks. They're about to be incredible. And then they missed on all the draft picks. And then the Rams said, we're never drafting in the first round again. I'm not joking. That's legitimately what they did. They stopped drafting in the first round and instead traded away all those draft picks because they didn't hit on them and won a Super Bowl doing it. So I guess there was some logic there. But that's kind of, that's not this situation. Like the Seahawks got good players. Like they did a good job with the picks. So, and even after the first year, Charles Cross didn't look great. Boye Mafe didn't look great. This year, they both looked better, and it also makes you wonder, like, could Derek Hall step it up? Who PFF isn't a fan of in year 1, but maybe in year 2 he'll do some nice things. Maybe Derek Young gets some playing time this year and does some nice things. Again, Tyreek Smith's off the roster, so there's that. But yeah, as a whole, I definitely think that you look at this and say Seattle's in a much better place now. Again, I want to make sure we understand the reasoning for it, though, I guess is the last thing I would say. Because you look at the overall chart and the overall list of what the Seattle Seahawks received, I think it's, kind of has to be mentioned, if Russell Wilson was still a top 5 quarterback, this would not have been enough, right? Like, it just wouldn't have. A top 5 quarterback is worth all of these assets that Seattle got. The issue with why this trade failed for Denver is not that it's not worth trading this much for a quarterback. It's not worth trading this much for a quarterback who is not that good anymore and is going to demand a big contract. That's why this trade failed, and that's why Denver is a loser and Seattle is a winner. And also, it's worth mentioning, part of why Seattle is a winner is because they happen to have another good quarterback on their roster in Geno Smith, who's outperformed Russell Wilson these past couple years, in my opinion. So that's why it failed. If it didn't work, if Seattle didn't have a quarterback, they probably wouldn't be that good. And if Russell Wilson was awesome, the Broncos probably would have made the playoffs last year. But again, for Seattle, number one thing you got to do is know how to evaluate talent. If they knew Russell Wilson wasn't going to be great, then absolutely great job by them to strike while the iron is hot. So, huge win for Seattle. Devastating loss for Denver. But I still would say if you think a quarterback is going to be great, don't be afraid to go out and make a trade for them. That's what I think. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.